This is The Cluttered Path, stories about life and the human experience. In the days leading up to Christmas 2002, Jack Whittaker, a 55-year-old construction contractor from West Virginia, visited the C&L Super Serve, his usual breakfast spot. At that time, the PowerBall lottery was heating up, so Jack decided to buy a ticket. On Christmas Day, the local news announced that there was a winning Powerball ticket purchased at the C&L Super Serve. The next day, Jack learned he'd won the $313 million jackpot. It was initially viewed by the townsfolk as a Christmas miracle, a feel-good story for a local fellow. Sadly, winning the lottery would turn out to be a curse for Jack and his family. The money changed Jack. Initially, he had grand plans to give to charity. He specifically called out, hey, I want to give 10% to my church. I want to help people in need, locals and around the world. They even started a foundation. But soon after the win, he began flashing money around town, bragging about his wealth, and he carried large sums of money in his car, and he told people about it. And he was robbed. He spent a lot of money in strip clubs and casinos. The locals said he became really obnoxious and arrogant. He was found sexually harassing female staff at bars, offering them money for favors. Eventually, he divorced his wife of over 40 years. The money also changed Jack's family. Tons of money that led to tons of friction. Cars, houses, toys purchased for family members led to a lot of hate and discontent. A particular tragedy within the family was Jack's granddaughter, Brandy. He lavished her with tons of cash. The kids at school knew about that, and they didn't like her. They said the money went to her head. That left her isolated and alone, and she turned to drugs. Eventually, she became addicted to crack, and she died at the age of 17. Her body was found wrapped in a tarp near her boyfriend's house. The title for today's episode is The Lottery is Not a Retirement Strategy. James, we talked about the lottery in passing and decided to do an episode on this.
Yeah, the topic invokes some strong feelings from the two of us, and it's certainly worth a discussion.
Agreed. Now, the Jack Whittaker story is shocking. It stands out for the destruction brought on a single family. Most of us are not going to win big like Jack Whittaker, but for those who do, winning the lottery often ends in tragedy. There's tons of content on the internet out there that say things like why lottery winners go bankrupt. I read an article in the New York Post from May 2023 that gave 5 primary reasons why people go broke after winning big in the lottery. The first reason is the big winners don't know how to manage wealth. If you think about it, most of us, we don't have that much money. We're managing scarce resources. We're paying the bills. We're setting aside money, just trying to make it to retirement. If you don't know how to manage wealth, there's a likelihood you can lose it. Another reason people go bankrupt after winning the lottery is reckless spending. That's easy to understand because when you win hundreds of millions of dollars or something in the tens of millions, you get the idea that, well, I don't have to worry about money ever again. But that's not true. More money equals more problems. You hear these stories about college kids being drafted into the big leagues. They end up making millions of dollars, and then a few years later, they get cut from the team. They leave the professional athletic world with no money. Kind of a sad tale, but reckless spending does that. They also overestimate their winnings. The government is going to get their cut. After all, the lottery, it is a tax. That is why they've instituted that. And that is exactly why the government sponsors the lottery, because they get their cut and people think, well, I've won $100 million. Okay, well, you only have about 50 million left after taxes. So just a heads up. But overestimating winnings, that's another way people go broke. Also, foolish investments. Problem here is that we come into a lot of money, we want to do something with it, and we end up putting our money into things that we don't understand and we lose. Things like startup companies, buying crypto, buying restaurants. If we're getting into things we don't really understand and don't really know how they work, there's a good chance that you could lose out on that investment. There's also people demanding money. If you win big in the lottery, you're going to get a deluge of requests from people in need, often fake stories. And it's heartbreaking to say no. You get this money and you're like, oh, I've never won the lottery like that, but I can imagine there's this guilt. You're like, oh, I've gotten this windfall of money. These people need help. I didn't really do anything to get the money. So you feel obligated to give people money. It's heartbreaking to say no to that. So lottery winners often give a lot of money away. Family, friends, strangers, a lot of people out there. If you're an average person and you receive a huge windfall, whether it's the lottery, inheritance, startup, or maybe an IPO, here's a recommendation. You have to learn in a hurry to avoid going broke. And here's some things to think about. First off, if I were to win the lottery, and this is what I recommend for you, if you win the lottery or if you have some kind of windfall that's huge, realize that you are at risk of making bad decisions. Money can change you for the worse, and it can lead to misery and strife. So be aware of that. I liken it to that Gollum creature in Lord of the Rings, where the lure of that ring, it twisted him into a hideous creature. We can't exclude ourselves from that. There is that pull. So you've got this large sum of money, and it can turn you into a different person. Now, understand also, after you win big, life as you knew it is over. I would recommend keeping the news to a small circle of people who can advise you. Because if word gets out, a lot of strangers are going to target you for money. And that's why wealthy people really don't flaunt it that much. You know they're wealthy, but they don't go around talking about it. Understand that life as you knew it is over. And also, I would recommend you hire a team of experts. Start with an attorney because there are going to be people potentially that come in and think they have a claim on your money, and you need someone that's going to represent you in legal matters. I also recommend a tax advisor. This is somebody who's going to help you stay out of trouble with the IRS because when you start handing out money to people, there are tax implications to that, and you have to be aware of that. Giving to a charity, much easier than giving to a person. Just be aware of that. You also need to hire a financial planner because they can help you put the money where it can work for you. And when you hire these people, you need to sit down and just tell them, look, I've got all this money. I don't know what to do with it. Help me. So be aware of that. I heard a story once of a husband and wife who'd received an inheritance of $22 million. They didn't tell a soul, not even their young adult children. What they did was they quietly hired a bunch of professionals to help them manage the wealth. And their plan was to wait until the kids established themselves on their own right before informing them of this money, was to tell them that they have a responsibility coming their way and they needed to learn how to do this. They needed to learn to take on the responsibility of managing a lot of wealth. They said, look, we don't want our kids to become waiters just waiting for mom and dad to die.
Yeah, I can see where there would certainly be some kids that might fall into that trap. It's sad though when you look at the lottery stuff. It was great that they were able to keep that inheritance quiet, but that's a lot easier now than winning the lottery because a couple of instances where the lottery winnings were awarded to a trust because the winners were smart and they went and got legal help and everything before they accepted their winnings. Instead of the lottery being able to stand there and hand a big check to somebody and get a lot of PR out of it, they wound up handing it to some lawyers, and nobody really knew who won it.
Wow.
But those days are sadly probably over. Lots of legalese has been added to the lottery terms and conditions.
Yes.
Should you accept it, you must identify yourself and they must let you use your likeness for marketing materials.
Yes. One of the downsides, you are required to put yourself out there if you win big, and that makes you a
Yep.
target. It's kind of
Yep.
sketchy, I would say, that they force you to do that, but that's the lottery. That's how it works.
Yep, exactly.
99% of us are not going to win big in the lottery. Now, I have no problem with people who play the lottery for entertainment, but my problem really is with politicians who sell us dreams. 42 states in the District of Columbia have state lotteries. Our vices, whether they be alcohol, tobacco, gambling, politicians view those as an additional source of tax revenue. And to keep the money flowing, the politicians have to sell it to us. And there are a couple of dreams that the politicians use to sell us on the lottery. Dream number one is the enticement. They come to us and say, you might actually win. So when they're crafting bills in the state legislatures, they say, look, a majority of the lottery revenue must be paid out to winners. We got to pay the winners because if you're not winning, you're not going to play. If they don't see people out there winning, people won't play as much. And then they specify in the bills, they say the government gets a smaller yet sizable portion of that revenue. And then they have to allocate a percentage to the company that's running the lottery. Now, that's still big money. So these companies lobby for this. So they partner with state legislatures to lobby to get the state lottery in place. It's big money for the state. It's also big money for the management companies. Now, looking at the stats, you have to consider when they're enticing you to say you might win. You see these advertisements on TV or you see these billboards out there. You have to realize the actual likelihood of winning a Powerball jackpot is 1 in 292 million. And what that means is if you went out and bought 300 Powerball tickets, you have roughly the same chance of winning as being struck by lightning sometime in your lifetime. That's a pretty slim chance of winning. And I have to say, the lottery is gambling. But when you think about gambling, in my mind, casinos, they're more upfront about their business model. And also if you're gambling and you're going to a casino, there are some games you can play where your mental capacity, your strategy, and your skill can be a factor to help you win. So if you're thinking things like blackjack and poker, with poker, you're playing against a crew, other people, and you're using skill and mental capacity. So it's almost a little bit fairer there, I would say, at the casinos. But when you think about buying lottery tickets, scratch off, or playing any of the games that they present to us, it's strictly a game of chance. You're handing over money, you may be giving some numbers in, it's a game of chance. But there are some similarities between the lottery and casinos. Casinos string you along, they keep you hopeful. If you go to a casino, you don't see the sunlight. And if you prefer to sit at the slot machine, you can sit there for hours just making these small bets over time. There's no sunlight. There are no clocks on the wall. You don't know what time of day it is. And your money slowly dwindles over time. So they're good at separating you from your money. But some of the games are you're actually using your mental capacity to win. Another similarities is the lottery actually also strings you along. You play your numbers, you try the scratch offs for more chances to win. You have better chances at winning smaller amounts here and there using scratch offs in other games. Now, I have a friend who buys scratch offs pretty often, actually, and he once won $100,000. After taxes, he brought home 72,000, and he said, "Oh, this is great. I'm going to use this for a down payment on a house." That was a good thing, and it was a good story. And when you hear those stories, that's going to encourage people to keep playing. And that's why the lottery, they have to get your likeness. They have to get you to agree to participate in marketing to get people to keep buying.
Yep. That's one of the great things about the legalized lotteries is that the odds of the winnings have to be published. So on the back of every one of those scratch offs, or at least on the website, they have the odds posted. I think it's actually on the scratch off itself, but from the multi-state Powerballs even down to the little scratch off things, they're all posted. So in other words, they're telling you that you're not likely to win.
Yes.
So
Uh,
being upfront about it.
right. But on the back end, if you win, they're going to market this thing and get people to, oh man, he bought this lottery ticket at this store. The odds are better there. I'm gonna go buy tickets there.
Yep.
Uh,
If there are places where if they sell a winning ticket of a certain value that, at least in North Carolina, they're allowed to get a sign to put out front that says a winning ticket was sold here.
right. Yes. And then the
Yeah.
store owners, they're incentivized because they get paid too. So that's the hook for the businesses. You gotta realize there are a lot of people making money off of this aside from the winners. So just be aware of that. So that is the enticement aspect of it. Now, a lot of people don't like that. They're like, "Ooh, it's gross. I don't want you advertising." I mean, you think about the tobacco companies and how they advertise cigarettes. Used to have race cars with Marlboro Red on the side, and we didn't like that. We don't really allow that type of advertising anymore. And there was a huge lawsuit against the entire industry, the tobacco companies, and tried to put them out of business, but really it turned out to be another racket, I would say. More tax revenue from tobacco. So that's how that worked out. But so people detest, they're like, "Oh, this is seedy. I don't like this. I don't want you advertising these vices to people." And so what they do to speak to those people is they sell dream number 2, and that is this. They appeal to our charity. And they say things like, "It's for the children. It's for education." And when you view the data on education spending, it really does show otherwise. Now, if you go out and look up articles on this topic as well about where the money is being spent, you'll see a lot of information out there. And I found an article in the Washington Post, and it talked about education spending as it relates to the lottery. And here's the biggest problem: the more money lotteries bring in, the more states cut education budgets as they anticipate more windfalls from lottery money coming in. Did you hear that? They cut the education budget in response to additional lottery money coming in. So they're not really spending any more money on education after they implement the lottery. And if we take a look at North Carolina education lottery, we were sold a bill of goods on this here in our state. We were told, "Hey, it's the North Carolina education lottery. It's going to help fund schools. It's going to be for the children." And despite the politicians' pleas and all of the companies that were lobbying for this, we didn't actually see an increase in education spending in North Carolina. And then we found out that the lottery money can actually be diverted to other line items in the budget. And an example is during a recession, Lieutenant Governor Bev Perdue, she voted to shift lottery money to the general fund to cover the budget shortfall.
Even worse, we see where sometimes the funds will be used to fund one or two special projects, which doesn't benefit the entire state. It's benefiting one particular area or one project. And then they use those projects, those wins, for marketing materials, similar to the lottery winnings mentioned earlier. It becomes about the marketing.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of seedy. Now, I expect Vegas casinos to put up billboards and advertise to me, "Hey, you can win," and all this stuff. But we know they're a business. But when our government elected officials and the lobbyists come to us and sell us a bill of goods like, "Oh, it's for the children." And then we find out later that they're not really spending any more money on education. They just have more money to spend. It's a tax. In North Carolina, when they were selling us on the lottery, I heard a lot of folks use these Hope scholarships in Georgia as kind of a gold standard because it was 100% focused on paying college tuition for promising kids. And then you find out that the first 15 years of that program, it went well because they provided full college scholarships for kids who met academic requirements. And they actually identified and reserved these funds for lower income kids because they had a policy that said you had to be from a household where the income was less than 66,000 per year. Otherwise, you weren't eligible for a Hope scholarship. And the lottery revenue covered all the costs of the program. It was good. It provided a way for poorer kids to get a leg up and be able to get access to a good education. But that was the first 15 years. And then problems arose. So they saw an increase in lottery sales in the subsequent years, and that led to a surplus. Then the more affluent parents started saying, "Hey, wait a minute, you got a surplus here. Why don't we remove these income limits? We want our kids to be eligible. That would benefit us too. So they did that. They removed the income limits and more affluent kids became eligible. But then the economy happened. Tuition costs went way up, enrollment skyrocketed, and the money ran out. That was the issue. So then in 2011, the Georgia State Legislature, they had to change the program because it was out of money. They lowered the annual payouts. They said, okay, this full tuition scholarship, now we're going to restrict it. They said it's only available for valedictorians, salutatorians, or kids who maintain the 3.7 GPA through high school and have a combined SAT score of 1200 or higher. And then when you're in the program, you have to maintain a 3.3 GPA for eligibility. In some schools, that is a tough nut to crack. So then you have this not so surprising outcome. The majority of the scholarship funds ended up going to the more affluent areas around Atlanta, and the poor kids were left out. So the original intent of the Hope Scholarship was totally missed because the richer kids were actually getting the majority of the money. The takeaway on this is state-run lotteries, they're a tax that's being marketed to you.
Anytime there is money coming in, there should be a hard look at where it's coming from and where it's going. It- Particularly when it involves whether the funds are being funneled towards the lower income folks or the more affluent folks. I'm all for things getting set up to help the lower income folks. And it is just so sad when those things get warped and changed and then no longer do what they need to do.
Right. In our episode on goal of leadership, number one is mission accomplishment.
Yep.
And you
What are you trying to do?
yes, and
What,
you have to
yeah.
analyze it constantly to say, are we still meeting that original mission? And oftentimes, especially in government, no, that's not happening. You're missing the mark. It's a tax, and it's a tax that's marketed to us. But as the debate rages, people object. They say, yeah, okay, cool. It's a tax. I'll give you that. But it's a voluntary tax. People can do whatever they want. So, hey, kiss off. But then you have to look at reality. It is a tax, and it goes even deeper. It's a regressive tax on the poor. Now, if you research this, you're going to find a lot of articles with titles like, Poor people are playing the lottery, but the rich are winning. And then you have to look at the data. And the data show us that most habitual lottery players, they're in the bottom 20% of income earners. And then you start looking deeper and you find out that the lottery advertisers, they target poor neighborhoods. I live in a generally nice suburb outside of Raleigh, North Carolina. We don't even allow billboards. So I'm not seeing lottery advertisements unless it's the 11 o'clock news and they're showing the numbers and winnings and stuff like that. So lottery advertisers are targeting poor neighborhoods. I don't like that. And then when you think about the more affluent, the upper middle class, and even the rich people, the ones that do play, they only play when the pot is huge because they know it's a game and they know the game and how the rules are played. Now, here's the
Yep.
insidious part. Go ahead.
I'm going to have to admit, there were a number of years when I actually played the Powerball.
Hmm.
That was back when the tickets were only $1,
Right.
but I would only play when the pot got ridiculous
Yes.
just because why not?
Right.
But that meant my total spend for any year
Hmm.
was never more than about $6
Oh, wow.
because I was only going to play when the pot was huge.
Mm.
But then they raised the ticket price to $2, then I stopped playing altogether.
Ah.
So so
Yeah, you were playing for fun. You were like, I might win. Okay, cool. I'm going to put in $6 a year. But then the stats, if you look at the stats, they show that people making $10,000 a year or less that are habitual lottery players, they're spending about $600 a year on lottery tickets. That's about 6% of their income going into the lottery.
Yep.
And now here's I think this is insidious. With regards to the poor, this is the insidious part. They're selling us this dream. And when they're selling this dream to poor people, it has this underlying message. They're saying this, hey, your only hope of rising out of poverty is luck. Play our game and you might win. But if you look at the research, 1 in 5 people believe that the lottery is the only way to accumulate savings. They believe that dream they're being sold. And if you dig deeper, you'll see that the lottery is actually one of many poverty traps that low income people face. And I would submit that if we're truly interested in education, we're going to teach people how to manage money. We're going to teach them that the lottery, hey, it's just a game, probably not going to win. Overall, your spending on lottery tickets is going to be way more than your winnings. So it is a game and the house always wins.
I find it hard not to say something to folks at the local convenience store. I've never seen anyone buy just one scratch off.
No.
Usually I watch folks dropping 50 or $100 on
Mm,
multiple tickets, and I can't help but wonder how often they're doing that.
right.
It just hurts to watch because nobody has that kind of money to just be throwing it away.
Right.
Very few people do, especially not the ones at the local Circle K.
Right. Yeah. And you see them and it's I don't know. You don't want to impose stories when you see people. You don't want to make up a story about their life. You don't want to project onto them, but oftentimes I get the sense that they're in a pretty desperate situation economically. They're buying these tickets with this false hope that, oh my goodness, I'm going to make it big. Now, some people do, but the likelihood, most people, 99.999% of people, they're not winning. They're just pumping their money into this system and they're not being told, hey, here's the game. Now, am I proposing that we get rid of the lottery, shut down Vegas? No, it's just not going to happen. Am I telling you not to play the lottery? No. It's none of my business what you do with your money because we're a free country in the US and most people, they're just playing it for fun. But there are some who play the lottery out of desperation, thinking it's the only chance they have at a better life. And maybe this episode can move the needle just a little bit for somebody.
Yep. I think there's one other group of folks that also play or those that struggle with gambling.
Yes,
I just want to put this out there. If you or a loved one struggle with playing the lottery, other forms of gambling, you can call 1-800-GAMBLER, or nowadays you can even text 800 GAM for help.
excellent.
So that's 1-800-GAMBLER or text 800 GAM for help.
Excellent. We're seeing these FanDuel advertisements here in our area now because North Carolina is now allowing online sports betting. And they also add those disclaimers. If you're struggling with gambling, call these numbers. I think that's okay. That's good. Am I proposing that we get rid of gambling? No. I think it would be an underground thing. If we outlawed it, it would be kind of like prohibition back in the day. People are going to drink more because now the black market is going to be providing those things for them. But that's it.
Yep.
We're going to wrap up for today. And the next episode or a future episode, we're going to talk about an alternative to the lottery as a retirement strategy. It's an achievable dream that we're going to lay out for you. So thanks for listening. Hope you have a great day and join us again on the path.